Hi there and welcome to Motion Matching for Unity. Today we're going to have another update, dev update for 1.9b. Now 1.9b is going to come very soon. It is going to be the final beta. So if you know what that means the next version 2.0, well, will actually be the real 1.0 release, and the price of the asset will go up, so be aware, you've been warned. There'll be ample time in between the release of 1.9b and the full release, and so yeah, there you go, you've been warned. So we're going to go through all the stuff that we've been doing in 1.9b, or I've been doing rather. What you're looking at now is the demo scene, which I'm currently working on. It's still very much work in progress. I want to make a better demo scene to include with the asset for the release. For now, we've just been going with this bare bones demo scene. Of course, I can't include this guy in it, but I'm just using him to test some features. So I'm going to make this character a lot more usable. I've put in walking. I've only just done that. It needs a bit of fine tuning. And the other cool thing that I want to put in is I want to put in some parkour into the demo. It's been requested a lot of an example more of how to use the warping system. So here's a quick example. And you can see my jump. Doesn't matter if I started at a different level and ended at another level, my feet still hit the ground. Yeah, it could use a bit of work there, but you get the idea. I want to do that a bit more with more complex things like vaulting with hands. I need to make a vaulting system, which isn't actually part of MXM. That's more of a gameplay thing, but a vaulting system to detect where vaults should occur. But as you can see, the warping itself works pretty damn well. And I mean, even though we're warping about a meter up into the air, there's really not a lot of you can't really notice that that it's being warped. It looks right, so that's kind of cool. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to source some really good quality animations to ship with MXM. It's just a sad reality. I'm not an animator. I don't have access to mocap, so we're gonna have to just keep making do with Unity's raw mocap that they give us, which is pretty terrible, as I've said many times. So that is that. There's also a lot more that has gone into this. So let me show you the other thing, and that is a trajectory generator that is for nav mesh. So I've baked a nav mesh in here, and we've got our two characters, and they're just running to wherever these targets are at the moment. And they're running with motion matching. They're doing it slightly differently, each one. Still experimenting. I only coded this today, so let's just see how we go. So off he goes to the thing, he does his turns, he hit the edge there. So this character here is using root motion as part of his way of getting around. So that's why he's cutting the corners like that, even though he's following a nav mesh. Basically under the hood, what's happening is we're generating a trajectory, and I'll show you that trajectory right now. Let me just get rid of the nav mesh agent. Alright, so you can see the trajectory gets generated along the path. Let me see if I can get that path to draw. Where's my nav mesh agent? I'm just looking at the other screen. So let's unfold that. Okay. So if I move him over here and I quickly select him, it's not going to show the nav mesh path, but you get the idea. You can see how the path curves around the corners, and it's pretty cool. So that is one using root motion. Now it could be a lot better. I would probably, in the case of using root motion on a nav mesh character, is I would get rid of arcs, because the arcs is what's cutting corner, and I would have like running plants at different angles. I don't have a like a 90 plant or a 45 plant while running. I only have like the higher angles, like 135 and 185, so that's why it's not doing that. This character is doing something a bit different. It's being controlled by the nav mesh agent, but MXM is trying to match that as close as possible. This is using the raw mocap data, so again, it's not very good. The more responsive your animations are, the more you have. If you had like proper mocap for this, it would be very good, I would say, with the motion matching. So off he goes. Now I've done something interesting here, and I was getting a lot of sliding, and my character was overshooting the corners, even though it's perfectly following the nav mesh. Well, it's the nav mesh agent that is controlling the movement. And what I did was, instead of like giving it a speed that's constant, I decided to go, okay, well, why don't we make it so that the root motion controls the speed. So whatever, if there's not enough root motion, then we reduce the speed to either the max speed or the root motion delta, and that just helps it get around corners. Still a bit of experimenting to do, but I think it's coming along pretty nicely, especially since I could have better animations for this. And we're getting all those like sort of plants around the corners automatically. I really wish I had really good, see, it's kind of messed up there, but you get the idea. The thing that I've actually made here is the trajectory generation that follows the path, so that's the important part of this. So that is what we have at face value in this scene. There's a lot of stuff under the hood, a lot of bug fixes, and we can go through that in a moment. I can't get enough of that. I'm really excited to improve this and make it so we can, have hand plants and do like vaults over and all that stuff. These boxes can all be different heights. It doesn't matter. Oh yes, that's one thing that I wanted to point out that I added to this to make this a bit easier to do. Because let's say you're going along, and with the current system in 1.8, you trigger an event and you tell it at the very beginning of the event when you trigger it, so when I press the spacebar, you tell it where the contact point in the world is. However, the system could pick any number of animations. In this case, yeah, I've only got a left and a right version of this, mirrored different ways, so there's not much variation. But say you had lots of different animations, you don't know exactly where it would land if there was no warping. So what I did was I created a system where you can trigger the event will get chosen, and then after that you can get where the contact is going to be if you don't warp, and then you can cast a ray at that point, and then you can update the contact points while the event is running. And you could do this continuously if you want. In this case, when I press the spacebar, it begins the event, chooses the event, figures out the contact point, then I extract that contact point, I hit a raycast down, and then I update the contact point wherever that raycast hits, and that is how I'm getting it to do it in this case. So that works pretty well. There's obviously a bit more I can do to make this better. Obviously I can run over the edge if I'm not careful, because there's that sort of anticipation. You probably wouldn't have anticipation in a jump in your game, but yeah, you get the idea. Alright, so let's have a look at some other stuff. Let's close this down. Actually, we'll open a different scene. Bear with me. So this is the standalone demo. We're going to see a few different things. Okay, so standalone demo. Let's turn on the gizmos because we're going to need them to see what's going on. I'll turn off the pose gizmos. The current pose. Okay, there we go. Now it's easier to see. Now previously you probably are aware that I was using a blend space, and the blend space position would be changed at runtime based off the trajectory error. It was a trajectory error warping. Now this was a functionality that I had to kind of make up for coverage gaps. But the thing is that it would just match whatever the central pose of that blend space was, and it worked for a time. But I think in a realistic case it doesn't work, because this is what I've implemented. And you can notice now I'm getting these blends, except my trajectory is actually curving. And if you have a look at my pose is actually accurate now. It's not coming off the center. It's not pretending that it's in a straight moving pose. Same with running. It actually is curving. And now this is what I call a scatter blend space. And what I do is, while I'm pre-processing, I take samples along the blend space based on a spacing that you can specify, and I create poses for each of those different samples. And that way I get all these different in-betweens, and that way I can match it. It might sound like we're making a lot of poses, but trust me, compared to like mocap data, we're still having a fraction, an order of magnitude less poses than mocap data, so you're getting a win here. If it was mocap data, you would be running in spirals, the character would be running in circles at different speeds, so you will get this many poses anyway. So this isn't inefficient, is what I'm trying to say. So the cool thing about this is we don't get any of that annoying snapping, and also it enables another feature that you're probably not going to notice here. Now, if you've been using MXM for a long time, bit of calibration issues there. If you've been using MXM for a long time, then you've probably noticed that at some point you're probably going to run into this issue where you do a move start, could be a move start forward like this, or a move start 180 like this, and as you're supposed to transition into a normal walk, you get this slight jitter. Most of the time you don't see it, and I've done a lot to try and mask it in the past. It's a problem that I've been trying to solve since before MXM was even in alpha, and it's a problem very specific to cut clips and not mocap data. Cut clips have this horrible thing called bad continuity where they just suddenly come to an end, and there's a number of things you have to do to fix this. You have to figure out a trajectory where there is none, and MXM solves that in a number of ways, and we've solved that in the past, but there are other issues, and the problem is it'll get to the end of the clip, and what MXM does is it forces a clip to change. It forces you to change your pose when you get to the end of the clip. So you change the pose, but then sometimes it wants to switch back, especially if you've stolen a trajectory. So you get this switching back and forth, and it causes a jitter. Now, as I said, I did a lot of things to mask this, so you didn't see it all the time. But now it's pretty much solved, and that is with something that I call complex animations. And a complex, or a compound animation is probably a better way to call it. A compound animation is, you've got your animation clips, and that's a raw animation, but then you've got things like a blend space, and you've got things like a composite. Now, in the past, composites were just used to figure out what the trajectory should be where there is no animation in the future. So it sort of like tacks on a trajectory from another animation in onto the end. Now, what it's doing is it's actually treating that composite, those two clips that go from one into another, as a single clip, and at runtime it is swapping between them, but the core system of MXM doesn't know that. It only knows that it's playing an animation, and it thinks that those two clips going together are one, therefore we don't have that continuity problem anymore, and it's actually got poses for it. Now, when I did that, that created the problem that I had with the blend spaces, which caused me to make this scatter space, but I'm a lot happier with where it ends up. Adding scatter spaces is a lot is exactly the same. There's no difference. You just change one setting on the blend space, and the old features are still there if you use them, so that's fine, but you'll find things are just a lot smoother. Now, what else have I done? I've made improvements to the trajectory. This past trajectory used to jitter a lot, so I improved that. There was actually a frame dependency bug that I found in the trajectory, which is horrible, and I'm sorry for that. But that is now completely gone. The trajectory is a lot smoother, and you'll also notice as part of that, I had to change what is a normal setting for... I didn't actually change it, it was just a result of making it non-frame dependent. Let's have a quick look at the trajectory generator settings. So previously you would have this position bias and it would be below 1. Now it's not. So you can see I've got a position bias of 15 and a direction bias of 10. At least it's frame independent now, which is good. You really don't want frame dependencies. This is why we're in beta. So let me get my gizmos back. So that is one thing. Another thing I noticed with the trajectory generator is that when you stopped, it would keep its direction. But you can see now, when you stop, when you let go of the stick, the trajectory direction facing reverts to whatever way the character is facing. And this is important because if you're going around the corner, I found that, as you stopped, it would struggle to match. It would struggle to match into a stopping animation because those angles are so tight. And you would just get stuck in this loop going around because it would be like, well, the trajectory's no good, so I'm just going to go with whatever's the closest pose, which is, of course, to keep playing the same animation. So now when it does that, it sort of just reverts all these facing angles to whatever your current facing angle is, so you can just stop. Of course, with mocap, probably not too much of a problem if you have a lot of good mocap. But yeah, there's a lot of minor improvements that I've done in the trajectory generation. There's a lot of minor bug fixes I've actually done in this update now. Part of what I'm doing is as part of trying to get to the end of beta and make this, more stable. So that's enough about that. There is one more thing in the trajectory generator that I've done. You may have noticed in the standalone demo, oh goodness me, I've lost it now. Let me just add it to the edge there. My inspector. Okay. So you may have also noticed in the standalone demo, let me turn off my gizmos. Get rid of that thing. When with the whole jumping system, let me see, jumping, it would be pretty inconsistent. You might, be walking and you'd get a running jump and then you'd get a walking stop, or you'd be running and you'd get a walking stop. Now, I've improved what happens with that a lot with adding in the matching trajectory for an event. And that is mostly done with this flatten trajectory. So if we flatten the trajectory, our trajectory, because say we don't want to jump, because there's some problems with jumping. If you're not providing the system a trajectory that has the jump in it, it's not going to match very well. So there's two ways you do this. You can actually flatten your trajectory that's generated, but you can also flatten the trajectory that is processed. So let me go to the project view. Let me just go to my preprocessor. This one. Unlock that. And I've lost that as well. In our composites now, we also have this option to flatten the trajectory. So in the case of my runs, where's my runs? There's a lot of animations here. Jump, run, start. I'm flattening the trajectory so that it doesn't happen. Q-Builds clips, the jump start, it goes into a jump and then it goes into this long fall, so it's not very good for matching in that way. So flattening the trajectory helps a lot in this case. So there we go. The other thing you probably saw was I had this option for runtime splicing. So that's what I was talking about with the composites, where it actually splices the clips together. You can choose it's on by default if you're having a composite added, I think. Either way, if you want to splice the clips together, that needs to be checked. Otherwise, this second clip is only going to be used for generating a trajectory and not actually splicing it at runtime. This reminds me of another thing. We have favor tags now. Favor tags are a different set of tags to require tags. So require tag has always been, if you require it, an animation that does not have that tag will not play ever. A favor tag is more like, hey, I want to favor this type of tag. Now it's a separate tag type because require tags and favor tags don't work nicely together, because requiring tags is absolute and favor tags is not, so you need to separate them out. So while you might have tags that are crouch, strafe, combat, whatever, you might also have different tags for different things, and the reason you would do this is to help it behave. In this case, I'm not actually using them. I can get my walks and my runs to separate out pretty nicely. I don't really have a problem with that. However, there are cases where you might. So you might have a walk favor tag and a run favor tag. Now you would then tag those favors. So let me have a quick look here. I'll get my timeline. I use a multi-screen setup, so I'm sorry, I'm just smashing things on here. We can now see that we can create favor tag tracks as well. So they operate separately, and we also have our normal tag tracks there. And we can add tags. And we also have it in the global space, which is probably where you're going to use it the most. These tracks are more for fine-tuning things. I'll delete those. So yeah, that is useful. So for example, you would just say something like, well, if my input, or it depends, maybe you have a system where if you're holding shift you run, or maybe it's just that when the stick is pushed further, you would just say, well, I want to favor this tag, and you would give it a favor of something like 0.5 so that its cost is less. Similar concept to pose favoring, which we have had for a while, which is this track here, which you literally can refine things and favor poses on an individual level. So that is favor tagging. That's been added. There's a lot been added, so I'm probably going to miss stuff, and this video is probably going to run so long that nobody watches, but that is all fine. Okay, so what else has been changed or added? Tons of things you wouldn't see. So one thing that I've added now, it's a further optimization to the system. Oh yeah, trajectory generation is now jobified to a degree. I want to jobify it more, but I'm just trying to do it one bit at a time. So the loop that goes through each iteration of the trajectory is now jobified. So that's running nice and fast. And also what I've done is I have created a runtime division of your animation data so that we're only ever searching the data for the tags that we want. So an example of this is maybe you, for example, right now I have the combat tag required. Now previously the entire animation set would be searched. Beside from do not use tags, they were never searched, poses. But now the animation data gets split into different tag groups based on what animations you have tagged, and it only searches those native arrays. So we're searching a lot less data. You're getting, if you've got a system like this where you've got multiple different move types, you're probably doubling your multi-threaded speed. And we're also copying a lot less data. So it's just a win, and it's something that had to happen eventually. So that is in now. That's cool. That also means it's a lot easier for the way that I set that up, the structure. It makes it easier for me to make it more modular in the future as we figure out what kind of modularities we want to have just to make the system easier to use. Okay, what else have we done? You know what? I don't think there's anything else huge that I want to be worth talking about. There's a lot of refactoring, a lot of minor improvements that you're probably not going to notice. They're very important, but you're not going to notice them. I'll quickly show you the scatter space thing now. So I no longer have to have all these different blend spaces. I can just have the one. So it's the same thing as before. I'll preview it. Actually, let me stop this from playing. And let me put this here. It's going to be stretched out, but doesn't matter. And we'll go to the scene view, and where am I? I'm stuck in my scene somewhere. I haven't got this very good setup for previews. But you can see my blend space. It's running, and I've only got a couple of clips. I've got my arches, and I've got my forward loop, so my arch left, arch right, and arch left. And you can see that's the blend space. I don't have anything on the y-axis. You could have going down a slope and up a slope. That's a good use, and much easier now with scatter spaces, especially if you put that into your trajectory generation system. So the only thing you have to do to make a scatter space is up here you have this type. So standard is the old style of blend space. We got scatter. This is scatters on the X and Y. So it's going to pick all these different points all through the space, and it's going to make poses for a loop of each of them. And then we've got scatter in the X and scatter in the Y. So in this case, I only have stuff on the X. So I'm only going to scatter on the X. I don't want to, all these poses up here would be a waste. And I can say what spacing I want. Maybe putting it down here would have been a better idea. Yeah, that's better. I can say what spacing I want. So if we look at the blend space, it's from -1, you can see that here, to 1. So if we do a spacing of 0.05, that's going to mean every 0.05 along this blend space we have a point. Bang, 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 bang. All those points get pre-processed. If you have scatter, it's going to do it. You got spacing for Y as well. Really simple. And it works pretty well. So there you go. That is the majority of stuff for 1.9b. I'm probably going to release it pretty soon. All the changes I want to add to the demo scene and all the features, they're going to come in the release version, because it's going to take me a while to do the gameplay code that isn't part of MXM, but I want it to be there so you have some really good examples of how to use the system. Thank you all for watching. I will catch you next time, and hope you enjoy.